Welcome to the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and I am on the mission to change the narrative of immigration, one immigrant story at a time. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants. My name is Heidy De La Cruz. I am your host, and I have a very special guest today. I have Summie, and actually, this episode is going to be a little bit different because she actually didn't immigrate to the United States. She actually immigrated to the UK. So we are going to be talking about her experience moving to the UK. And I decided to, do this episode because I wanted also to show to the audience that the United States isn't the only place that people immigrate to. There are, various different countries that people go to. So thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your story. If you could just introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we can get started on growing up in Hong Kong.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Heidi, for having me, and especially acknowledging that I'm a little bit different perhaps to your normal guest. And having emigrated from Hong Kong to the UK when I was age 15, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So
Yes.
my name is Summie. Currently, I'm a career coach working with multicultural people, and particularly if they're going through career transitions as well. But we'll dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. And definitely, I definitely want to get into your business and how that got started. And definitely want to give the opportunity for people to be able to connect with you if they
Mm.
choose to connect and follow or work with you. So let's get started on, what you remember from Hong Kong and then the events that led you to move to the UK.
Yeah. Yeah. So this kind of leads me to think about my actually whole cultural heritage and where my grandparents were originally from.
Mhm.
So my paternal grandfather was actually originated from China, in a province called Hubei. And he has taken the move to Hong Kong during wartime. And in my
Mhm.
grandparents' generation, there was a lot of wars going on. So there was the Sino-Japanese War, there was the Civil War in China that led a lot of people to migrate down south.
Mhm.
So my grandfather did that. My maternal grandparents were actually water people. They were in the Canton province, and they were, working in water, on boats a lot, and they were growing up in Hong Kong. So my parents actually grew up in Hong Kong. I also then therefore grew up in Hong Kong. In my parents' generation, there weren't very much of an opportunity to
Mhm.
migrate elsewhere. It was just very normal for people to be born in Hong Kong, staying in Hong Kong, studying in Hong Kong, working in Hong Kong, and having very sort of long, careers in a certain field. There was just so much stability, and in that era, a lot of prosperity. So it wasn't easy. It wasn't hard to find a job.
Okay.
Um, I was actually age 15 when I considered moving abroad. It was a very popular thing, I think, for a lot of people at the time who have kids, because the British system was seen to be superior, perhaps, to the Hong Kong system. And there was so much pressure to Hong Kong students at the time. Even the suicidal rates were very, very high. And there was just a lot of pressure on getting really good grades out of exams. So a lot of people naturally thought we would get the kids over to somewhere else to have a better education. And I think my parents considered that, but they also gave me the autonomy to decide for myself. Obviously, at the age of 15, that autonomy comes with
Yeah.
a lot of, wow, a big responsibility in a way for myself. But I think at the time, I wanted that sense of adventure. I wanted to really look out to places that wasn't, in my comfort zone, and I wanted to experience something a little bit different. So at the age of 15, I decided with a long list of pros and cons with my parents that I would study abroad without my parents. And I
Wow.
think at the time that was a very, very big, big decision. And looking back, perhaps I didn't realize the impact that has had on my life. Now, I did travel over with a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, and went to the same boarding school. And I think I'm always thankful for that. That I think they just gave me a lot of, comfort, when it was very hard to leave my parents. But
Yeah.
even then, it was just, wow, it's such an experience. When you think about boarding school, you think about, oh, wow, Harry Potter, especially
Yeah.
in the UK. That's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. And, it was a little bit Harry Potter-ish, but at the end of the day, it was really about independence, about really leaving home comforts to a place where you're probably a little bit different from everybody else. So
Yeah.
it was a real experience for me at the age of 15. But yeah, that's kind of what brought me to the UK initially.
Oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts. 15. So boarding
Yeah,
school, no, high school, right? You're still
high
in high,
school.
what we
That's
call
right.
high
Yeah,
school. Okay. Oh
yeah,
my gosh. And your parents just let you go at the age of 15. So like
yeah.
walk us through that. So you arrived,
Mm,
you already knew like the boarding school and everything. How was like that process of like,
yeah.
getting there?
Yeah. I was very, very privileged to be able to do that because
Yeah.
obviously these boarding schools are not cheap, right? But
Yeah.
my father actually worked in the government at the time, and being a
Okay.
civil servant, there was that benefit of, we'd get bursaries basically. So I was compensated in that sense. But I think what really, I guess, shook me is the whole point around, okay, now you're on your own and really
Mm-hmm.
you have to make friends by your own. You have to really kind of take care of everything. That's not just studies by your own, on your own. And I think that's been quite a difficult thing for me at first. And also leaving parents, especially during the times of festivities. And I remember the first autumn being in the UK when there was a moon festival, or what we call the Mid-Autumn Festival. And it's just a festival that a lot of Asians celebrate. They have mooncake together with their families. They play with lanterns. They see, the moon together. Such a family orientated sort of festivity. And I remember being quite sad at the time because I've left my
Mm,
parents and my grandparents in Hong Kong. And
yeah.
although there were a lot of Asians in my school as well, which is very different. I didn't have mooncake, I didn't have those home comforts. I didn't have my grandfather's have, the flat to kind of, be with each other in. And I just felt, there was a sense of, gosh, it's almost a sense of grief or a sense of loss. And that was difficult, right? But at the same time, I know that my life has been kind of helped and supported by the boarding school environment. I didn't have to cook by myself. I didn't have to really kind of do laundry by myself entirely. I was kind of spoiled in a sense, but at the same time, there was so much emotionally that I had to take care of. So I think, even then, it was quite something, as you look back to, a very, very big difference to being in Hong Kong, staying at home, and having a home to go back to and seeing your parents every single day. So I think in that experience, I really, really treasured time with my parents whenever I go back to Hong Kong and really enjoyed seeing my. I think how I get the relationships stay with me because I all go back to Hong Kong and really see my friends go back for a holiday, and it just kept those relationships going. But yeah, I guess I don't know if that answered your question, but there was
Yeah.
so much, I guess, as I reflected upon that experience, that as an immigrant, I think you kind of share these thoughts as well as you grow up. And you realize that other immigrants, be it in the UK or in America, you share so much of this in common. This feeling of grief, the sense of loss, perhaps, the homesickness, and sometimes feeling you're not really here or there. The sense of belonging kind of differs depending on your situation.
Yeah.
And I think realizing those sentiments really helped me, I guess, support others who are immigrants who are around me as well.
Yeah. So let's talk cultural shocks. What
Mm.
cultural shock did you experience first moving to the UK?
Very fascinating because it just goes to show there are so many flavors of experiencing cultural shock. And I think for my first cultural shock, it was the pace. So the pace of work, the pace of,
Oh,
transportation, the pace of just living life. And I studied in well, kind of semi-rural area. There was a town, but it wasn't London or New York, right? So it was a much slower pace compared to Hong Kong. Everyone seemed to enjoy life a little bit slowly. They have their tea, they have a bit of, the buses don't run on a very regular basis. And I think that was a big shock to me because in Hong Kong, everything was so quick paced. You have the
oh,
metro system, which is called the MTR, which goes on time and every single day. And if it were 5 minutes delayed, basically you have it on the news the next day. People would
oh,
complain. So that's
wow.
very different to the UK, where, half an hour delay is kind of normal. And if you see your train cancelled, well, so be it. And people are so patient with it as well. Well, I say some, but, I see some people being more patient than others. But, that really got me. I was like, wow, okay, so you could actually live a life without being constantly stressed about time. That's good in a
Yeah.
way. And I think that was a big cultural shock to me as I arrived. I mean, in a boarding school, we didn't get a lot of chance to really travel outside the school. But
Yeah.
even then, during term breaks, I could see that being a massive difference. And the other thing I found being very different was during my studies, I realized how much as Asians, we kind of care more for the answers than questions. Whereas I think in the education system here, we are really encouraged to be curious and ask questions. So, I will sit in class and think about the question I might have to ask, but I feel so pressurized to think I should really know the answer, and my questions are a little bit stupid. If I do ask out loud, people laugh at me. Actually, that's not been the case. And I realized that other students have been asking questions and they would just be raising their hands up and saying what they think. So I say that these are perhaps the biggest cultural shock that I've found. I'm sure there are others that I could think of as well that would bubble up perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were able to visit your parents back in Hong Kong, like during breaks
Mm.
and stuff?
Yes, I was. Yeah. So very
Oh,
thankfully, I was able to travel back to Hong Kong during the big holidays. So, Christmas, Easter, and summer, and we usually have quite a long summer. So I guess that kind of contributed to the feeling of belonging in a way,
yeah.
because I felt more belonged to Hong Kong than perhaps someone who's emigrated and never really gone back to their own country.
Yeah.
So I feel like really half-half at the time. But I found that when I go back to Hong Kong, sometimes I feel that I'm a little bit different now to perhaps people that I talk to. And
Yeah.
there will be some sense of, well, actually, they've experienced something when I was away that I haven't really been part of. So that sense of, okay, so I could see that, there's a difference there, but I didn't really know how to deal with it at the time. So I just felt like, okay, I don't really feel belonging, a sense of belonging here anymore. I feel like a little bit of an outcast, as someone who's been born in Hong Kong. And I think that's changed perhaps how I see my friendship circles. And I think those who really, supported me throughout it, I could see that, yes, actually, they don't really mind that much. And they quite appreciate the fact that I've been to the UK and, really embrace that difference perhaps in what they're experiencing and vice versa. I think in my world, I really embrace, knowing a bit more about them, someone who's kind of born and bred in Hong Kong, studied and worked in Hong Kong for a long time.
Nice. And so what made you decide to stay in the UK? Because you went for boarding
Mm.
school. So like how was it like making that decision? It's like, no, I'm gonna stay.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very thought-provoking question. And I think the easiest answer is to gain more experience here. And I think that's always driven me to be in the UK because I feel like I quite like the culture here. I like the sense of, having difference in pace. And I like being in a multicultural place. And I think in London, I could say that, it's very multicultural. You go onto the streets, not everybody speaks English. A lot of people have English as a second language. And I
Mm.
feel like it's just such a big melting pot of multicultural people and really enjoy that. And I didn't think I would as much. Perhaps when I was studying, I was more kind of, let's stick with my home crowd because I could speak that language and I could have instant noodles right from them as well. And I think, that really grew on me, actually, that sense of embracing the diverse ethnicities in London. And I think the other thing is I've now got two kids, and I think that really changed my perspective on, okay, where should I be? And I
Mm.
know that, the UK education system obviously has its flaws too, but I feel like I would want my kids to grow up in an environment where there's more freedom and there is more opportunity for them to speak out. I feel like in Hong Kong, yes, you do get that to a certain extent, but it's a lot more pressurized in terms of academics, and you always feel the need to excel in academics. And I just felt like for now, I would rather have my kids in the UK. But obviously, that's a very, very hard decision. And I'm sure a lot of immigrants could testify to that, especially if you've got a family, that you're really torn, especially if you've got parents abroad as well, that you're very torn between the generations. You kind of want to serve the younger generation for sure, but you also want to remember, right, the older generation, if you've got parents abroad, that at some point they might need you. So what happens now? For now, I'm quite happy where I am, but that's never to say I will migrate again.
Okay, nice. And so you mentioned a little bit about like the education system in Hong Kong. It sounds like
Mm.
it's very competitive. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
think similar to a lot of Asian countries, it's highly
Mm.
competitive. I think competition is just something that was driven into you from a very young age. It's very
Oh.
interesting because some of my friends have got babies and they go to calling contests. And I know,
Oh.
that's a little bit of a jokey way of a competition, but
Yeah.
I think that sense of, okay, you need to stand out from the crowd. I think that's a very strong sense. I think in the education system, they really try to push you to excel. And that's not to say that's wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
you could say that actually that produces elites, right? And in a global stage, actually Asians excel in a lot of places like music, in mathematics, in science. And I might be stereotyping that, but there is a strong sense of actually we're driving for excellence. And I think that
Yeah.
really gets distilled in workplaces too, where people constantly strive for the best.
Right.
Now, I think that is a good mindset, but at the same time, if you push too hard, it creates a lot of unnecessary pressure.
Have you been thinking about starting your very own podcast? Well, I created a podcast course to help you launch your podcast without feeling overwhelmed and with simplicity. Okay. So it is a 6 week podcast course. Each video is less than 15 minutes long, so it doesn't take that much time to get through. And it breaks down the steps that you need to launch your podcast. Again, 6 weeks or less. So you can do it faster than 6 weeks, or you can take longer than 6 weeks. It's all up to you. You do it at your pace. And you will get lifetime access to this course. In addition to the 6 modules or the 6 videos, you also get videos about editing. You'll also get the podcast digital planner, which helps you create your content and helps you with the episode outline. It helps you with the show notes outline. It helps you stay on track with the podcast cycle checklist. It has the guest intake form and also a Google Sheet episode organizer to make sure that you are organized and set up from the jump to be able to plan out your content, organize your episodes, because that is key to long-term podcasting, right? You'll also get 3 exclusive interviews with leading podcasters who are killing it in the industry. And in addition to all of that, you will also get the podcast workbook, like how to launch a podcast workbook that goes along with each module. So you can watch the videos and then also follow along with the workbook. All of that is included in the course. If you are interested, head over to my Stan store. The link is in the show notes and the show description. So you can sign up for the course. And there's also a referral program included. If you refer someone to me to launch their podcast and they sign up for the course, I will give you $50. That's right. You will receive $50 if the person you referred does sign up for the podcast course. So all the information is in my Stan store. If you have any specific questions, you can always email me at Heidi@HeidiDeLaCruz.com, and let's get your podcast launched.
And I think that's why I really now having kids begin to think harder about, okay, so where is it that would be best for them?
It's reminding me of this show called The Parent Test that came out.
Mm.
Did you see it?
I haven't
You
actually. Is it
haven't?
on
Okay.
Netflix or okay?
On Hulu. It's
Ah,
called The
right, it's
Parent
really
Test. I
interesting.
can't remember which ch- cable network it came out of, but it was a family. It was 9 families, and they each had a different parenting style. And there
Mm.
was an Asian family, and I cannot remember what the parenting style was. I think it was either strict or high achiever, one of those.
Mm.
But the
Yeah.
little girl was 5,
Mhm.
and they had her in all types of extracurricular activities. She was homeschooled, but they had her also like in tennis and in violin and piano. But she was brilliant. Like the math that she could do was super fast. And I was like, I can see both sides of it because they were
Yeah.
very strict. But then it was like she's 5. Like let her be a child. And so obviously, like the whole show was just trying to prove like which was trying to show like which parenting style brings out the most well-rounded children. So
Mm.
again, there was 9 different ones, and they had them go through different challenges and stuff. So like the challenge of like when the child got to choose what they wanted to do, like she just wanted to play. She wanted to color, she wanted to play and stuff. And like her mom was trying to like, well, let's practice our math or let's practice. And she was like, no, I just want to play. So that's what is reminding me of when you're talking about the high competitive and then the push to excel and things like that. It reminded me of that show, which is actually a really interesting show. And I really it was really a reflection on me and my parenting style as well. Cause it was like some of the, you know, parenting styles I agreed with, and then some of them I'm like, no, like, you know, so it just
Yeah.
reminded me of that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that insight on the education system in Hong Kong. Now I do want to ask before we get into your business and how that got started, is there anything that you do miss about living in Hong Kong?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I miss a lot of things, and a big part of it, obviously, is people. But I'd say a lot of it is also food.
Oh,
So I
okay.
did miss the food in Hong Kong a lot. And I think you could get such quality, cheap foods in Hong Kong
Mm.
that in London you just don't get the equivalent of. And I think in Hong Kong, being quite a multicultural city as well, in a way, that you do find that, especially Asian foods, you get so much variety. I think you do get that in London, to be honest, but I think, I do miss that sort of, street food style Asian food.
Mm.
And I think that's what I missed when I came over. But obviously, a lot of the pie is to do with actually people in Hong Kong. So my
Oh,
parents, my
yeah.
extended family, my friends as well. But thankfully, I have kept in touch with a lot of my friends as I was growing up. So I think that made a lot of difference. So whenever I go back to Hong Kong, I would be doing obviously the foods, having all these like,
Yes.
the Chinese dim sum, fried rice, fried noodles, all that
Oh,
stuff that I really, really love. And also meeting up with my friends, maybe
yeah.
alongside food.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so now let's talk about your business. So you say you're a
Mm,
career coach. So
yeah.
how that came about?
Yeah. So that's another very fascinating story about how, I guess, there was a big turning point when basically there was a lot of turbulence in my workplace about 2 years ago. And I think it really prompted me again to think about, okay, so what do I want to do with my life? I was quite stuck at the time because obviously I've got very young kids. And at the same time, I really wanted to make an impact on others. And the workplace that I was in, it was a very quick-paced place, and the role that I was in was a strategic one as well. So it wasn't like I was stuck in a toxic culture. It was
Mm,
far from that. However, I want to do something that makes a difference to others. And at the same time, I was reading this book called Third Culture Kids. And interestingly, that really related to my experience when I was 15, when I took that leap and took that biggest risk of my life to come over to
yeah.
the UK. And that book really spoke to me because it talked about, well, actually, that's a shared experience that a lot of immigrants have. You have that sense of belonging, of near the here or there. And also in your work, you have to take some risks, right? And I guess I was thinking at the time that, I was kind of not sure about this career path as I go along, and asking myself whether I could really take this risk of stepping out of my comfort zone. And that experience at the age of 15 reminded me that I could, because I've already taken a massive risk to be emigrating to the UK. Whereas I could have, stayed very comfortably in Hong Kong in a way, regardless of the pressure that the education system brings. And I just thought to myself, well, you know what? Actually, I could really look back to the experience and think that, I've still got this sense of adventure in me, like my grandparents who came from China and migrated as well. And I could really do this. So it felt like, yes, I could take the risk. So having read this book, I then also talked to a coach who was so, so helpful in helping me explore what was really the priority for me at the time. And in those coaching sessions, I was really then able to be honest with myself. I talked to her and really brought out, okay, well, actually, what I see the genuine value in my work is that I can help people, I can help others, and particularly also people who are from a multicultural background like me as well,
Mm,
because there's just so much shared experiences in our lives, and a lot of that could be also relevant to our workplaces. So that's the time that I was kind of dwelling in all of that, but then having those coaching conversations really helped me jump out of my comfort zone and took the leap. So I then trained up as a coach, and I started to talk to a lot of multicultural people who are like immigrants or expats in the UK and in other English speaking countries as well about my experience, but also their experience and helping them explore their paths, including their career paths as they go forwards as well. So that's kind of where I am. I guess, where I really like to be is to help more people who are in this bucket to really navigate their career transitions, because I acknowledge there's so much that we share in common in the workplace as well. I think one big challenge I always bring up is the confidence issue.
mm,
Because as immigrants, I think quite a lot of times, English could be our second language.
yes.
We may look very different from everybody else in the workplace. And from my own experience, it wasn't one-off incident. It was a series of incidents that kind of chipped away my confidence little by little. And I didn't realize that actually there was a side of this that was to do with my cultural background.
Mm.
And I think you know this a lot of this is driven from where you're brought up and your values as well. And I think I could relate to this because there was so much sort of cultural heritage and values around things like modesty or humility from an Asian background. And because of that, we really value the sense of, okay, let's think before we speak. Or if there's a hierarchical relationship, that we really respect the other person's opinion if they're kind of higher up before our own. And I found that really chipped away my confidence because I would always wait for someone to speak and let
Mm.
my own opinion dissolve in the background. And sometimes I think, well, I will think hard about this before I speak. And whilst I was thinking, my thought was set out by someone else and someone else took credit for it. So little by little in these meetings, I start to speak up a little bit less and hide away until it really affected my confidence. And it goes to show in my feedback. So someone else said to me, you should be more confident in this situation. But I think at the time I just didn't know how to deal with it because it was now part of me.
Yeah.
And I think it took me a long while to realize that as immigrants or even as Asians, we could really find our voice in the workplace. And I think this really contributed to what we call a bamboo ceiling sometimes. So Asians, particular East Asians, finding that they hit a bit of a glass ceiling as they go through the ranks in corporate. And I think this is probably actually more of a problem in the US at the moment. And in the UK, people seldom talk about it, but it is an issue that people should really be coming to realize as well. So I think we could do a lot more in terms of building up our confidence and really be more comfortable in our shell. So even having these values of modesty and humility, finding the balance in really projecting our voice in the right way. So that's what I do now. So I help people through career transitions, perhaps going through a promotion, perhaps going into a different job, but finding their confidence and finding clarity as well as they navigate through these paths.
Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you once again for being here and sharing your story. How can people connect with you?
Yeah, so you could easily find me on LinkedIn. So it's just Summie Young. And you could also find me on Instagram at summiecoach.me. And you could also find me via this gift method. So basically, Heidi, I really, really love to offer your audience a gift, which is a free part thing that I give to any podcast audience that you have. So what happens there is that you would get a career change workbook from me and a resource
Mm.
list from me. If you're really stuck about where you could start in changing your career, it would include a series of questions that you could reflect upon. It could just take 1 to 2 hours of your time to really reflect on, why is it that I want to really change? And what are my cultural gifts and cultural heritage that would help me in my career journey? Second part of that gift is that I acknowledge it could be a lonely journey sometimes as immigrants and also as people who are looking to change in their careers as well. So the second part of this is that I want to gather people, like-minded people together in a workshop, and we will work together on building your confidence for your next career change. And the third thing that I'm offering is I appreciate that the unique situations of everyone warrants some time and exploration time for yourself and some space for yourself. So what I would like to offer is this one-to-one session, an hour of no obligation chat. So basically in this conversation, it will be a little bit like a consultation, but also a deep coaching session to delve into your own unique situation. And together we'll work out a path or a start of a path for you. So yeah, that's my gift to your audience, Heidi, three parts
Awesome.
in one. So hopefully you enjoy that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for offering that. And how can people sign up for that? Do
Oh,
you have?
yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you just need to go to my website, summieyoung.com/gift. So
Okay.
Summie spelled it SUMMIEYEUNG.com. And I'm sure, Heidi, you probably include that in the
Yes.
podcast notes as well.
Yep,
Brilliant.
you
Thank
already
you.
know. So I will definitely include the link to your LinkedIn, to your Instagram, and obviously the link to that free gift so the audience can go ahead and, make it easy for them to sign up. And thank you so much for offering that to the audience. Is there any last words that you would like to leave with the audience?
Yeah, I guess that is one piece of advice I always have for immigrants and also people who are maybe struggling to find clarity in the workplace is that always treat it as an exploration
Mm.
because I think that's what really helped me and others that I've encountered in this space to get through this really turbulent situation in their lives. I think with career changes and also immigration, it's also, always very turbulent. You would always have sort of, chances where you face into really deep valleys in your life where you feel a little bit like, am I doing this on my own? And you would also feel a little bit like, okay, I can't really see what the future is like. So there's a lot of uncertainty in immigration and in career change as well. So I would like to encourage that to treat this really as an exploration for yourself, diving deeper into your values and also who you are. And I think being clear about your values and identity would really help you advance in your life as an immigrant and also in your workplace as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you again for being here and sharing your journey. And yeah, just thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Heidi, for the opportunity. And it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Mummy Podcast.